in the 2018 standings, but is it going to be Andretti that picks up Fernando Alonso? So a lot of answers are within that. I would be curious to see if I am so sorry I got a brain fart, but Elio Castroneves returns to a full-time ride. I'll be surprised if that happens. But what are we looking at here? Some of these major stables of players that we thought would be a player for Fernando Alonso, particularly Penske and particularly Andretti Motorsports.
Well, the rumored team that we mentioned, and David Landsman mentioned this, I don't know why, is he keeps insisting that Carlin is going to get the services of McLaren's Fernando Alonso with a three-car team. The thing is, though, why would Alonso want to go to Carlin? I mean, if you are Fernando Alonso, you want to be here because you want a chance to win races and win a championship. And, yes, Carlin had a decent, okay year with a 5 top 10 performance from Charlie Kimball. But that is not a team that is capable of challenging for a championship in just his second year of existence on the Indy Car level. It's not going to happen. So you look at the teams left. Well, if it's not Penske, I'm assuming the thing right now is there's going to be, I think obviously there's some burnt bridges between Alonso and Honda, but I believe there will be cementing of the fences, and I believe that at worst they will provide a fifth car at Andretti, and that 29 car will be Fernando Alonso's.
Right, we'll move on quickly. We'll go through the top 10 as it ended in 2018. Scott Dixon, Alexander Rossi, Will Power, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Joseph Newgarden, Simon Pattison, Sebastian Bourdais, Graham Rahal, Marco Andretti, and James Hinchcliffe. And I'm sorry, I said he came in fifth. He actually came in ninth, Marco Andretti. Of course, Robert Wickens somehow managed to finish 11th after it all. And so forth. So as we look at the top 10, what are your thoughts in the 2018 season?
What a bounce back for Hinchcliffe after failing to qualify for the Indy 500. You talked about Wickens at the top half of the season, had a solid run. That's part of the reason why he stayed up there. Man that just missed out on the top 10, Takuma Sato. Interesting that Rahal Letterman has decided to keep him for another year. Obviously, the win late in the year certainly helping his cause to keep a ride. And you talk about Rahal now. Who are they going to be looking for their third deal now that both Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward, who were supposedly their top two targets, are now out of play? Do they look possibly at a Stoffel Von Dorn? Do they look at maybe a driver that is out of luck in the coin deal? If, say, Fittipaldi, a Petro Fittipaldi, Zachary Clayman DeMelo comes into play, would they take one of them? A lot of unknowns right now. And the thing is, like I said, though, and we talked about this with Tyson Laudenschlager with our Field of 33 back in May, are they overextending themselves? You obviously got to be thinking even more so that if they're expanding to a 3 full-time car deal for 2019.
Well, absolutely. So let's look ahead into the 2019 Indianapolis 500. Yes, it's not too early to be talking about that. Not at all. And so Tony Stewart going to be supposedly making an attempt to qualify there at Indianapolis 500, which I'm sure that he will. And then, of course, we look again, we talk again about Fernando Alonso. A lot of people are going to be talking about him as we get ready for the 2019 Indy 500. But certainly Indy 500 is where you see everybody bring out the extra cars, and drivers do get a shot at driving. And we also see one of the great things, I like Hinch. He's a good guy. I really do like him a lot. Class act. But one of the great things about what happened with James Hinchcliffe at the Indianapolis 500, we saw a true bump day. And I like that. I think that's something special. I think that's why we have a field of 33. So everybody comes out, but not everybody gets in the race, and it doesn't matter. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway doesn't care if you're James Hinchcliffe, doesn't care if you're Marco Andretti, doesn't care if you're Ed Carpenter, doesn't care if you're Scott Dixon. You got to be good enough to be on that track, and the Indianapolis 500 is always, always a special place in the month of May.
Well, I think right now, looking ahead to 2019, I think they need to increase the parameters of qualifying. I think we could be talking 38 to 40 cars attempting to qualify, and as we saw this past year, Tom, we had 2 delays due to rain. If you are trying to get all 40 cars qualified and get everyone through the line, you're going to need to increase the time parameters from where they are right now, from 11 to, I think, 550. I'd like to see Douglas Bowles, Jay Fry, Mark Miles look into possibly adding maybe an hour and a half to an hour to 15 minutes to qualifying start at 9:30, 9:45. That ensures that we would get through the field, even if rain were to intervene slightly, and then we would have time for attempts. And I think that's part of the reason why you saw someone like a James Hinchcliffe fail to qualify is because of those 2 rain delays. You only had one chance, and then he had the mechanical failure. Had there been more time, I think he would have had enough time to figure it out and get himself in the field. Now, it obviously didn't work out that way, but considering you have an increased field for the full time, you probably have an increased entry list for the Indy 500. So I think if they're going to continue with the 2-day format, they're going to have to increase the time frame and the window, I think, to be able to make it possible so it's fair for everybody. Because, again, you're going to have situations where weather conditions are going to play a role in who gets an advantage in qualifying and who doesn't. So I think you need to increase the parameters to make sure it's as even as possible for everybody and that everyone gets a chance. And if there are chances for second attempts, that they are given to multiple drivers instead of just a handful that just happen to be at the front of the line before the time ran out.
We're talking with Matthew Embry, 96.1 FM WSBT up in South Bend. Obviously, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish affiliate and flagship there. And we'll get into the Wake Forest game here in just a moment, probably here in the next segment. If you can stick around with us, Matt, we'll talk some college football. I'm not sure if Rick is going to be able to join us until the second hour, but definitely we are going to get to that. But I want to talk with you a little bit about Tony Kanaan, A.J. Foyt Racing. Certainly, A.J. Foyt Racing, good stop for him. A lot of people think that may have been his final stop. He didn't light the world on fire in 2018. He had somewhat of I won't call it mediocre appearance at Indianapolis, but he certainly had an appearance at Indianapolis that was less than desirable, I would say. I think a lot of people were feeding the rumor that Tony Kanaan was going to retire either this year or next year. What are your thoughts on that? Are we seeing the end of the career of a great driver like Tony Kanaan?
I think we're seeing, if it's not going to continue in the full-time schedule, I'd see an extended like what we're seeing with Elio, where he's going to continue running the Indy 500 until he loses the desire. I mean, he was leading and in control of this race till he had that flat tire. If not for that flat tire, I think you could have made a very good case that Tony Kanaan would have given Ed Carpenter and Will Power a definite run for their money in terms of trying to win a second Indy 500. Now, would he have won it? Who's to say? But I think he would have definitely been a factor for the victory if not for that flat tire.
Well, absolutely. And so let's quickly go through some of these other drivers before we have to go to break and then come back for our next segment. And we'll get into the college football. You know, a driver I was really impressed with. He finished 23rd, but I was really impressed over the course of the season. I think he's a good, solid driver. I think he's got a lot to come back to in 2019. Zachary Clayman-DeMeco, certainly one of the drivers to keep your eyes on.
Question is, where is he going to end up? He certainly has the money with PaySafe to run a full schedule. The question is, though, how's things going to play out a coin? Is Vassar Sullivan going to leave and take Bourdais with them and create two seats? Where does Fittipaldi end up? And what about Stoffel Van Dorn? And then, of course, don't forget about Santino Ferrucci, who ran two races in a third car. So the question is right now is, who are they going to take? And if they don't take Clayman-DeMelo, the question is, does he end up maybe in that third ride with Rahal? Does he end up maybe being a full-time replacement for Wickens at Schmidt? I mean, there's plenty of options available. It's just a question of way that things are going to lay out at this point and where the opportunity is going to be for Zach to find a ride at this point. I think that's the big question mark right now is where he'll end up, because he certainly has the money to fund a full season and certainly the talent from what we saw, particularly at the Indy 500, where he was not even expected to compete in, mind you, and he still had a very solid performance. So you look at that scenario, he's certainly one driver who it's unknown where he'll end up. He'll be solid, but it's unknown at this point where he's going to end up.
You know, we saw Connor Daly come in and be able to get in the car at the Indianapolis 500. Not a very good showing. Certainly got caught up in the mess that he had nothing to do with, of things that happened before he was ever born, that happened with his father. And, again, it was a story that got blown out of proportion. No need to go back into it. But Connor Daly has seen his struggles, yet a very talented driver, especially at Indy, especially in the Grand Prix.
I think right now, if he's stuck with Tom Burns again, I think if it's an extended field, Connor Daly's going to have a problem making this field. I mean, it's just not limited to Pippa Mann. I mean, Connor had his problems. I don't know if they necessarily saw eye to eye on things, and if they do come back, I think there's going to have to be a lot of groupthink put together because things did not go smoothly for them. And then you look at some of the other ones in there, certainly Sage Karam crashed out of his fourth consecutive Indy 500. A lot of people are still demanding that he become a full-time driver. If you can't finish in the biggest race in the world, what does that say about the rest of the schedule if you are given a full-time seat? So I think right now, if Sage Karam wants to stay relevant as far as racing, he's got to be able to make the finish in these events. He just can't run up in front and then crash. I mean, that's not how it works. And I think you look at Sage, I think you look at Connor, I think 2019 with these increased entries is going to become make and break for some of these guys, even for maybe even a J.R. Hildebrand as well, trying to make the field for Indy.
Absolutely. What about Colton Herta? Can we throw him in that conversation?
He's solid. I don't think there's a question. I mean, the money that's going to be coming in from Steinbrenner, the money that's coming in from Andretti and the technical support, I think you're going to be very impressed, and there should be a major improvement in that Harding organization. But I'm not sure if Colton Herta is going to be the lead man on that team. I think the lead man is going to be the new Indy Lights champion in Pato O'Ward, who has made a dramatic climb from where he was just a couple of years ago in Pro Mazda all the way to the Indy Car Series in a span of 2.5 years.
Sage Karam, what are your thoughts?
Like I said, he's got to race cleaner. You don't gain anything by running up front and then failing to finish. You've got to be there at the finish, and we talked about that. I talked about it. Tyson Lonschlager talked about it during our Field of 33. He has got to find a way to finish these races. If you can't finish, you're not going to score points. And if you can't score points, you're not going to be getting championships. You're not going to be able to keep rides. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, he'll get another chance with Dreyer and Reinbold, I'm sure. But the question is, can he keep the car out of the wall? And right now, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I think the answer is a definite no, he can't.
So James Davison was the last driver that I kind of really wanted to touch on. What are your thoughts?
It's going to be a struggle for him as well if he does get another ride with the increased entry list and the deeper field. Did take advantage of it. Unfortunately, had a disappointing performance. Obviously, the car handling really hurt him, and it led to the contact that knocked him out between himself and Sato, but did well to make the field. But I don't know if they can be able to be competitive. If they're going to be competitive and make sure they make the field, they need to put something together a little bit faster than they did this past year, because I think the depth of the field for this year's race is going to make it imperative that these last-minute, teams put together with, masking tape and bubble gum are not going to be competitive this time around.
We're talking with Matthew Embry of 96.1 FM WSBT up in South Bend, certainly the flagship of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So we're going to kind of do a mini breaking rank match here for about 15, 20 minutes or so before we got to get into the NFL talk with ed-kracz. We've got a lot to talk about with the NFL. The Cleveland Browns get a huge win against the Jets. The world is coming apart. The Browns are going to the Super Bowl. Okay, well, you would think so. Anyway, and certainly I think they have their quarterback pretty much in a solid situation. But does Notre Dame have a quarterback controversy? We'll find out when we get back right here on the Balance Radio Network.
The Air National Guard is a reserve component of the United States Air Force and serves alongside active-duty Air Force members in times of a national crisis. In addition, the Air Guard serves the state and local community in a wide range of capacities. The reason people join the Air Guard is as diverse as our members and includes such reasons as a deep desire to serve their country, money for college, travel, new job skills, and the pride that goes along with belonging to the greatest military organization in the world. I joined because I felt a calling to serve my country, but I didn't want to be far away from my family, so the Indiana Air National Guard was a perfect fit for me. With over 95 different career opportunities to choose from and 100% paid college